Hello, welcome back to Bricked and Mortared. My name is Kirsty Merriman and I'm a full-time bespoke infill property developer based out of Auckland. Today, I'm singularly focused on stormwater development contributions covering impervious surface area. You want to listen to this, and I'll tell you why. Because you want to save yourselves between $4,000 and $24,000 if you're building detached and duplex houses infill in Auckland. I can tell you how to do that if you don't know about this. It's been a closely held secret by some people. So in this podcast, I'm going to tell you what these stormwater development contributions are, why it's an issue, a little bit of background, and what you can do about it. How can you yourself review your assessment at a top-line level? So stormwater development contributions are naturally a share of the cost of the infrastructure required to deal with stormwater, so rain. We build more stuff, we cover more ground, there's less absorbency, the water's got to go somewhere and it goes into the network. But you should be paying for the extra ground you're covering. So why am I raising this as an issue? Well, I was looking at some of my developments and a new site, and the numbers weren't forming a nice pattern for me. So I was seeing that my terrace houses were being charged a much lower proportion of stormwater compared to my detached houses. And moreover, the smaller the detached houses were and the more compact the infill, the greater the cost, or the greater than proportion. So I started looking at it. How much councils charge and their process of charging is set in the Local Government Act 2002. Councils need to write their own policy. They need to show their methodologies. They need to show people where the money's going, how much is going, and allow the ability to object or reassess the calculated contributions. Within the Auckland current policy, they update it every once in a while. It looks like it's about every 3 years. They talk about fairness. It must be fair and equitable. They're also allowed to group things together. It makes sense because you just can't treat everything individually. But that grouping has to be done in mind of fairness and equity. So for the sake of administration, you can't just put everything together. So how did, in my opinion, this issue come about? Well, the unit of demand factors were determined in 2012 or reviewed in 2012 as all the local legacy councils came together. There are human factors, environmental factors. And for a long set of reasons, they determined that a unit of demand for stormwater was based on the impervious surface area that one legacy house covered. So that's 292 metres squared. Legacy. Makes sense to me. Whether it's 250 or 300, it's a relativity. But you'd kind of expect that on average, with a single level, 3-odd bedroom home, a driveway, a garage, and maybe paved paths and bits and pieces around. Not unreasonable. In this report, the writer, Mr. Ian Munro, mentions that that's probably okay if the typology, so the style of houses, the locations, and the unitary plan remained as it was. If any of those links changed, it needed to be reviewed, i.e. As things get more compact, closer together, they would need to review it. We also know that councils want more density because you get more efficiency. So for stormwater, you have a lot of people in one place. You can have your catchment areas close by. You don't have to have as many long pipes. Your servicing gets easier. In that report, Mr. Munro also discusses a couple of words. Now that's really important going forwards because it's about significance. So you're allowed to group things together. So when is grouping not fair? Or the differences become significant. In his report, he says that 5% is of a relatively low significance, and 50% variation is an extremely high significance. So I'm saying 25% is significant. So what is the situation, and what do you need to do to make sure that you're not getting caught in an overpayment that you may not be aware of? Let's see if I can explain it, and I'll use a few graphics here. One house, if it is freestanding or duplex, by nature of the policy and Schedule 2, is 292 square metres that it covers. That will represent the house's footprint and its share of the driveway, whether it's a driveway to itself or it shares that driveway with 12 other houses. Now I'm going to change that 292 for simplicity to 300 because it's easier to multiply. So if I have one house that's 300 square metres and the site will have probably had it, I don't have to pay anything. I put a new house on, I have to pay another 300 square metres and so on. So let's take a fictitious site, and that's 700 square metres. I'm allowed to cover 60% of that site. So that's 420 square metres. I'm going to say 400 for, talking purposes. And I want to put 6 compact, affordable houses on it in South Auckland and Papakura. So 6 times 300 is 1,800 metres squared of ground coverage. Now here you go, but isn't a site only 700 metres squared? Yes, correct. My site is only 700 metres squared, and somehow I have to squash 1,800 metres squared of housing, driveway and accessory buildings onto that 700 metres squared site. But to make it even worse, I'm only allowed to cover 400 metres squared of that site, so that's an impossibility. So for each unit, the council says I need to pay $24,000. So I'm going to say 25 here. So I've got 6 houses. Because I've already paid a contribution historically, because there was originally a house there, I get one of them without charge. So I have to pay 5 new houses. 5 times 25 is $125,000. But that makes no sense to me. It's so much money for such affordable small houses. So what do I need to do, and what do I need to calculate? Well, I need to say that my original house took up 300 metres squared of that site, which is probably right. And my new design gives a total coverage of 400 metres squared. So that's from my resource consent. So my additional coverage is 100 metres squared. So that's the original size, 300, up to the new developed size, 400 metres squared. So I've added 100 metres squared. Now, the council has said that my total coverage is 1,800 metres squared. But again, take off the original house, 300. So I come down to 1,500 metres squared. So what is my variation above the average? Well, I've got 100 metres squared compared to 1,500 metres squared. So that's 1,500% overcharged, when in fact I should be being charged as if I have got 100 square metres compared to 292 square metres. So a third of a unit of demand. So 100 divided by 300 metres squared is 0.333. So I should be paying only a third of a unit of demand, which would be a very small amount of money. So a third of 2,400, which is about $8,000. what can you do about it? You've got that calculation. You're allowed to object, or first of all, get a reassessment. And the council will seriously consider that. But you need to do it within 10 days of receiving your initial estimate. And you can do it under several categories: incorrect calculations, the policy not applied correctly, or the information wrong. I'm just saying, well, the policy's not applied correctly because it's not fair or equitable. How can you charge me 1,500% above what I'm actually doing? It makes no sense. So I really focus on the fairness and equity. If that doesn't work, you can go in for an objection, but it's probably, you won't really need to do it because they do seem to respond. You need to point out the ridiculous land coverage. So how can you charge me for covering 1,800 metres squared when my site is merely 700? You point out the overestimate by 1,500%. You don't need to put all the numbers in. So in recent times, I've been involved with a number of reassessments. I've shared my information. I've sat with people. I've had a group of people that I've discussed it with. I've also been commissioned by a couple to do it, merely on a 2-hour basis, because it's not a hard task at all. The amount that people have had reassessed has been varied from $12,000 for a development, another one at about $7,000, another one at $21,000, and another one at $115,000. They went in, one person went in with a very generic question because they didn't quite know what they were asking. And they got a pushback to say, Schedule 2 says you've got to pay this, therefore pay it. They came to me to say, well, how did you get it? Actually, I haven't had it. I haven't had any reassessment. And I said, well, you probably need to voice some of the clauses and state things in a little bit more of technical detail. They did that. They had another conversation. I think they'll push back again. But then they wrote their formal email. And of course, there was no response until I think it was 13 days later. It was reassessed and they got a considerable savings. So this is worth doing. In my personal opinion, the council should be looking at their policy, because I know, and some of you know, that there is a revenue generation scheme going on that is significant, where people are taking potentially high levels of the reassessment value to do it. This is not rocket science, people, at all. It is very simple, very, very simple. Hopefully you've understood this if you've just been listening. If you have been watching, I've got some of the calculations over to the side, and there'll be the odd link in the show notes. So thank you all very much for listening to Bricked and Mortared, and I'll speak to you next time. Thank you.